Betty Jo Bowman was born on December 13th, 1990, in Wichita, Kansas, to Nancy and David Sponsel. From her earliest days, Betty radiated the kind of warmth that drew people to her. At Bishop Carroll Catholic High School, she was known for her bright smile and genuine kindness, qualities that would follow her throughout her life. Betty's path to pharmacy was driven by a desire to help others. She threw herself into her studies at the University of Kansas School of Pharmacy, earning her doctorate in 2017. Jason Herold, who would later train Betty at Mayo Clinic, said, "She was so sharp and very reliable and hardworking and smart. We hit a home run with that one. She was like a very, very good pharmacist. She was also a really nice person." Eric Mueller, a colleague who worked alongside Betty, remembered her infectious positivity. She brought a positive, upbeat attitude into every situation, and her kind heart was always open to helping others. Betty wasn't just dedicated to her work. She was passionate about life itself. She loved traveling, taking trips to Yosemite, Hawaii, and Iceland. She was a fierce advocate for LGBTQ+ rights, and she absolutely adored her corgi, Sir Crumpet II of Mulberry. Friend David Berger recalled their final conversation. Literally, a week before she left, she was describing this double rainbow she saw before work when she was walking Crumpet. She wished us all happiness and hoped that we found beauty in our day. That was just her. But the person who should have treasured Betty's beautiful spirit the most was the very person who would destroy it. Connor Fitzgerald Bowman entered Betty's life as she was building her career. Connor was a medical student, 2 years into what would become an internal medicine residency at Mayo Clinic. He was intelligent, ambitious, and had specialized knowledge that would prove deadly. Connor was a poison control specialist with intimate understanding of toxic substances. The couple married on May 30th, 2021, at the Rhapsody in Independence, Missouri. To friends and family, they seemed like the perfect medical power couple. Both were climbing their professional ladders at one of the world's most prestigious medical institutions. They moved to Rochester, Minnesota, where Connor completed his residency, and Betty found her calling in the operating room pharmacy. But beneath the surface, cracks were already forming. Connor carried substantial medical school debt that forced the couple to maintain separate bank accounts. By August 2023, friends would later testify, the marriage was deteriorating rapidly. There were discussions of divorce, allegations of infidelity, and mounting financial stress. What no one realized was that Connor had already begun planning a very different kind of solution to his marital problems. On August 5th, 2023, while Betty was at work saving lives, Connor Bowman was at home researching how to take one. His internet search history would later reveal the methodical mind of someone planning the perfect crime. Connor typed into his computer, "Internet browsing history. Can it be used in court?" Then, "police track package." He was laying the groundwork for what investigators would later recognize as one of the most premeditated murders in Minnesota's recent history. Connor's medical training had given him a unique advantage. As a poison control specialist, he understood exactly how various substances affected the human body. He knew which poisons were difficult to detect, which symptoms would be attributed to other causes, and most importantly, how much would be lethal without being immediately obvious. On August 10th, Connor made his first attempt. He prepared a smoothie for Betty, behavior that struck her as odd since Connor never made anything for anyone, according to friends. Betty took one sip and immediately said it tasted bad. She even had a friend try it before throwing it out, joking that Connor might be trying to poison her. To those who knew Connor, this joke was completely out of character. Connor wasn't someone who joked around, but Connor wasn't joking either. That same day, Connor's computer searches revealed his true intentions. He was researching online pharmacies and had converted 120 pounds to kilograms, Betty's approximate weight. Weight calculations are crucial when determining lethal dosages of poison. Connor was literally calculating how much poison it would take to kill his wife. On August 11th, Connor found what he was looking for. He researched liquid colchicine, a medication typically used to treat gout, but which becomes deadly in higher doses. To medical professionals unfamiliar with poison control, it would look like severe food poisoning until it was too late. Connor made a $52.20 purchase using his Mayo Clinic employee email address. He was ordering his wife's death sentence through his work email, a detail that would later help prosecutors prove his calculated mindset. But Connor's planning went beyond just acquiring the poison. He was preparing for his new life as a widower. On August 18th, 2 days before Betty would die, Connor searched for "is widow gender neutral." He was already thinking about how to describe himself to the women he planned to date. In fact, Connor had already created a Bumble dating profile where he identified himself as a widower. He was actively messaging women and making plans for a future that required Betty to be dead. Connor was so confident in his plan that he was essentially living as though Betty had already died. The digital evidence would later show that Connor had researched everything from oil of wintergreen toxicity to methods for destroying internet browsing history. He had studied sodium nitrate as an alternative poison and had calculated the exact formula for lethal colchicine dosing. Connor wasn't just planning a murder. He was designing what he believed would be the perfect crime, using his medical expertise to stay one step ahead of investigators. What he couldn't account for was leaving a digital trail that would eventually lead police right to his door. But first, Connor had to execute his plan, and for that, he needed Betty to trust him one more time. August 15th, 2023, was supposed to be a typical Tuesday evening for Betty Bowman. She had made plans with friends, looking forward to unwinding after another demanding day in the operating room pharmacy. But Connor had other ideas. Once again, Connor surprised Betty by making her a drink. After the strange-tasting smoothie incident 5 days earlier, Betty might have been more cautious. But this time Connor was offering alcohol, rum for her, whiskey for himself. Friends would later describe Connor making drinks as completely out of character, but this was now the second time in less than a week that he'd prepared something for his wife to consume. Betty texted her friends to cancel their plans. She was staying home with Connor, she said, and he had surprised her with drinks. She told friends she was having rum while Connor was drinking whiskey. To Betty, this seemed like a rare moment of intimacy in their struggling marriage. Perhaps Connor was trying to work things out. She couldn't have known that she was drinking poison. The colchicine Connor had purchased was tasteless and odorless when mixed with alcohol. Betty had no way of knowing that each sip was delivering a carefully calculated dose of toxin to her system. Connor watched his wife drink, knowing exactly what would happen next. At 2 a.m. on August 16th, Betty woke up seriously ill. She was experiencing severe gastrointestinal distress, vomiting, and dehydration. Connor, playing the concerned husband, helped her to the bathroom and offered comfort. He was, after all, a doctor. He knew exactly what Betty was experiencing because he had caused it. By morning, Betty was texting friends about her condition. "I've been very sick since 2 a.m., she wrote. She thought it was from the large smoothie she had consumed 5 days earlier. Betty was still thinking about that odd-tasting smoothie from days earlier, not realizing that her real poisoning had come from the loving gesture of a drink shared with her husband. Connor accompanied Betty to Mayo Clinic's St. Mary's Hospital, where she was admitted with what appeared to be severe food poisoning. The medical staff, not suspecting poison, began treating Betty for gastrointestinal illness and dehydration. Connor played his role perfectly. He was the attentive, worried husband, constantly at Betty's bedside. Medical staff noticed how calm and composed he seemed, but attributed this to his medical training. Doctors often remained steady in crisis situations. What they didn't see was Connor repeatedly accessing Betty's medical records throughout her hospitalization. Using his position as a Mayo Clinic resident, Connor was monitoring Betty's condition and treatment from the inside. He told hospital staff that Betty was suffering from hemophagocytic lymphohistiocytosis, or HLH, a rare condition that could explain her symptoms. Tests for HLH proved inconclusive, but Connor's suggestion showed his intimate knowledge of how to misdirect medical professionals. Betty's condition deteriorated rapidly. What had started as apparent food poisoning was now causing cardiac issues, fluid buildup in her lungs, and organ failure. Emergency surgery was required to remove portions of her colon due to necrotic tissue that was literally dying from the poison coursing through her system. Throughout this ordeal, Connor maintained his facade. He comforted Betty, spoke with doctors, and updated friends and family. But he was also doing something else entirely. Even as Betty fought for her life, Connor was messaging women on dating apps, describing himself as a widower and bragging about the $500,000 he expected to receive from his wife's life insurance policy. On August 20th, 2023, Betty Jo Bowman died from organ failure caused by colchicine poisoning. She was 32 years old. Connor's response was immediate and telling. He wanted Betty cremated as quickly as possible, claiming she didn't want to be a cadaver. He tried to stop any autopsy from being performed. For a grieving widower, Connor seemed remarkably focused on preventing any further examination of his wife's body. But unknown to Connor, someone was already suspicious of his behavior. The call came into the Southeast Minnesota Medical Examiner's office on August 21st, 2023, just one day after Betty Bowman's death. An anonymous voice delivered information that would transform this from a tragic medical case into a homicide investigation. The caller reported that the Bowmans were talking about a divorce following infidelity and a deteriorating relationship. It was the kind of tip that medical examiners and police take very seriously when someone dies unexpectedly. The caller seemed to have intimate knowledge of the couple's private struggles, information that wasn't widely known among their friends and colleagues. Dr. Elizabeth Weiss, the medical examiner, immediately halted Connor's cremation order. If there were suspicions of foul play, Betty's body needed to be preserved for a thorough autopsy and toxicological examination. Connor's insistence on immediate cremation now appeared in a much more sinister light. Captain Casey Moylanen of the Rochester Police Department was assigned to lead the investigation. With over 20 years of experience, Moylanen had seen his share of suspicious deaths, but something about Connor's behavior set off alarm bells from the very beginning. Detective Alex Kendrick was brought in to handle the forensic aspects of the case. Kendrick specialized in digital evidence, a skill that would prove crucial as investigators began to uncover the massive digital trail Connor had left behind. The first breakthrough came from an unexpected source, the University of Kansas, where Connor had previously been employed. University officials contacted Rochester police to report suspicious internet searches on Connor's work devices. The searches included detailed research on colchicine, sodium nitrate, and repeated queries about how to delete browsing history. What emerged was a picture of meticulous planning that contradicted every aspect of Connor's grieving widower facade. The investigation team obtained warrants to search Connor's electronic devices. What they found would shock even experienced investigators who thought they'd seen everything. From 15 different devices, police extracted 9 terabytes of data, more digital evidence than most murder cases generate in their entirety. The data painted a chilling picture of Connor's mindset in the weeks leading up to Betty's death. Every search, every website visit, every online purchase was preserved in digital amber, creating an undeniable timeline of premeditation. Connor had researched the lethal properties of multiple poisons, studied how to avoid detection by law enforcement, and most damningly, calculated the exact dosage needed to kill someone of Betty's weight. But perhaps most disturbing was Connor's dating app activity. The investigation became a race against time. Connor was still free, maintaining his innocent facade, and pushing for Betty's cremation. If investigators couldn't build a solid case quickly, crucial evidence might be lost forever. By early October 2023, investigators had built an overwhelming case. The financial motive was clear: a $450,000 bank deposit receipt found at Connor's residence represented Betty's life insurance payout, money Connor had been bragging about to women on dating apps even before his wife died. Dr. Elizabeth Wise's autopsy confirmed that Betty had died from organ failure caused by colchicine poisoning. Yet Betty had never been prescribed colchicine and had no history of gout. On October 20th, 2023, Connor Bowman was arrested during a traffic stop. He was charged with second-degree murder, with bail set at $5 million. The same day, Dr. Weiser officially ruled Betty's death a homicide. Connor's reaction surprised investigators. He appeared detached and calculating, immediately requesting an attorney and refusing to answer questions. For Betty's family, the arrest brought relief and devastation. Her sister Brianna posted, "Betty, we miss you. Poison was not the way you were supposed to go. I don't understand why Connor did this. You were so perfect, patient, and understanding to him." Betty's mother, Nancy Sponsel, began the long journey from Kansas to Minnesota for court proceedings. The family started a GoFundMe campaign and took custody of Sir Crumpet, ensuring Betty's beloved corgi would be cared for by people who truly loved her. But prosecutors knew their work was far from over. The methodical planning and calculated use of professional knowledge pointed to something far more serious than second-degree murder. On January 5th, 2024, a grand jury reviewed the evidence and returned an indictment for first-degree premeditated murder. The upgrade reflected prosecutors' confidence in proving that Connor had planned Betty's death for weeks in advance. First-degree premeditated murder in Minnesota carries life in prison without parole. For Connor, this meant he would never see freedom again. Defense attorney Michael Schatz faced an almost impossible task. Connor's own digital activity had created a comprehensive record of his planning and execution. The defense filed 3 strategies: not guilty, alternate perpetrator, and suicide, but legal experts viewed these as desperate measures. Nancy Sponsel continued her trips from Kansas, determined to see justice for her daughter. As Connor awaits trial in the Olmsted County Adult Detention Center, the case stands as a reminder that domestic violence can hide behind any facade of professional respectability. Betty Bowman was a brilliant pharmacist who brought joy to everyone, wishing her colleagues happiness. The question now is whether a jury will see what investigators saw: proof of one of the most coldly calculated murders in Minnesota's history, committed by the very person who had promised to love and protect Betty most.